Welcome everybody to the Captain Spot. I'm your host Justin Freeman, 6'1", 275 pounds, fantasy knowledge. It's week 14, Sunday Night Football, Steelers at Bills. This should be a pretty fun game. We were just talking about these teams not very long ago and independent matchups of one another. Now they get each other. And surprisingly, those Steelers just got knocked off by my Washington football team, my beloved team. You don't hear me talk about them because I haven't had anything to talk about. But my beloved Washington football team has dethroned the undefeated Steelers. And now the one-loss Steelers travel up to Buffalo, take on the Bills. Should be a pretty fun game. A couple really interesting offenses. Saw Josh Allen get really back on track last week against San Francisco. Should be a lot of fun. Before we hop into the slate, quick reminder, go check out cptspot.com. I've added a couple new features there this week. I'm playing around a lot with some of the simulation stuff that we're doing here on Showdown, and I'm doing some main slate stuff there too. So feel free to go check that out. I've got some pretty interesting optimization tools going on there. What I'm doing is running the entire main slate, the Sunday main slate, which is 13 games long, and a simulation on each of those 13 games. Let's optimize the lineup at the end of those things and see which players pop in the winning lineup most frequently. And so I think that's a really powerful tool. We can compare that to ownership, identify key leverage options. I think it's pretty cool stuff. So go check that out, cptspot.com. Like, rate, review, subscribe to the show, as always. Without further ado, let's hop into this matchup where we're talking about, Steelers traveling up to Buffalo, where it's going to be a 48-point total. Bills favored by 1.5. So the Steelers, the one-loss Steelers, possibly the best team in football, maybe not, are underdogs here. 1.5 to Buffalo. Like I said, Josh Allen played out of his mind last week. Can he keep that up? 48-point total seems to kind of head just right in the middle. Based on the totals, what we've seen so far this year, sort of right in the sweet spot there at 48 points. Nothing too high, nothing too low. So overall, Vegas says, hey, close game here. Relatively normal total, nothing, no crazy shootout likelihood, and not going to be a boring game either. So we get to play it pretty straight overall, and I don't think we have to really worry about a runaway one way or the other. Two talented teams going up against each other here. I will say, defensively, both of these teams sort of draw very different matchups. Ben Roethlisberger in this contest going to get the best matchup on paper that you can get, going up against the Buffalo pass defense. On the other hand, Josh Allen gets the worst matchup that you can get, going up against the Steelers pass defense. So will it matter? Josh Allen, is he matchup proof? Obviously, we know that he is a unique rusher, but can he get by and get past this Pittsburgh Steelers passing defense, using his arm? I think that's sort of the million-dollar question. I think Ben Roethlisberger on the other side could be in for a big game going up against Buffalo. Now, while 48 points does not suggest like a true shootout, I think this does have the opportunity to get a little bit high scoring. So let's dig right into the slate where the two quarterbacks will be two of your most expensive options here this week. 10-8 for Ben Roethlisberger, 12-2 for your guy Josh Allen. So Josh Allen may be a touch prohibitively expensive, at least in the captain spot for us this week. So, like I say, as always, and really for either of these quarterbacks, but specifically for Allen, it is tough to imagine a winning lineup without Josh Allen in it. Now, getting unique at the captain spot, I think, is certainly on the table. I think usually we are really drawn to mobile quarterbacks at captain. Like, we know captain is something the field is doing more than they should, but when it's a mobile quarterback, that really changes the dynamic. So Josh Allen is fully capable of getting there, but that price point this week makes it really, really tough, especially when we think about just how concentrated the targets are between these two offenses. On the Pittsburgh side, you've got Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, Eric Ebron. Those four guys, and they are, it's very much down the middle with those guys. I mean, either one of those could lead the team in targets on a given week. On the Buffalo side, obviously John Brown still on IR. So that means we're getting Stephon Diggs, we're getting Cole Beasley, and we're getting Gabriel Davis as a 3-wide set. And it's not a whole lot more beyond that. If we look at last 2 weeks as an example of what the Buffalo Bills have done offensively, it's been Isaiah McKenzie who's been the wide receiver 4. and got less than 20% of the snaps in each of the last 2 games. So really tight 3-wide set there for the Bills. We're getting a little bit of Dawson Knox mixed in there as well at tight end. Overall, I know Dawson Knox caught a touchdown last week, but not being a huge factor. That was his highest target share of the season last week, 11% for Dawson Knox. So let's talk about price points on these pass-catching options. Obviously, on the Buffalo side, we've talked about Josh Allen, 12-2. How much will it cost to pair his pass catchers with him? It'll cost $10K for Stephon Diggs. I think that's a perfectly fine price point for Stephon Diggs. He's probably the guy with the highest upside on the entire slate, not named Josh Allen. So at $10,000, I'm happy to pay it. We are talking about mammoth usage. I mean, I think you can project Stephon Diggs for very close to 30% targets. In fact, I'll probably project him for a hair north of that. But I think, projecting anywhere around there is just about right in this offense without John Brown. The question is what's left for everybody else at that point. You got to feed a little bit to the running backs, just a handful of targets to the tight ends, but then the rest is going to go to Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis. So how do we figure out what's going to happen there? Well, let's take a look at last 2 weeks because we now have a 2-week sample size of life without John Brown. And Gabriel Davis, full-time player, 97% of the snaps in back-to-back weeks. So he's basically coming off the field for like a snap or 2 per game. He's gotten 17% and 11% of the targets, which is just a touch low for where we'd like to be. We'd like to see him, getting more targets per route. And that's been something I focused a lot on here in my process here this week. Identifying which players are seeing the most targets per route, because that tends to cluster right towards sort of an even number. It's a very predictive thing. Routes project to targets. But for some players, like when Stephon Diggs is in the offense, Gabriel Davis is not going to get as many targets because Diggs is just going to get more targets per route. Hope that makes sense. Cole Beasley, on the other hand, has been getting targets. 17% and 29% of the team's targets in the last 2 weeks without John Brown. So, and that's coming on fewer snaps than Gabriel Davis gets. So, let's not get it twisted. It's Stephon Diggs, full-time player, and it's Gabriel Davis, full-time player. Cole Beasley is practically full-time. However, he is going to rotate in whenever the team goes to 2 tight end. Cole Beasley's coming off the field. Davis, Diggs staying out there. So just know sort of, formationally how these guys are going to be used. That means like when they get in tight around the goal line and stuff, Cole Beasley may not be on the field in that particular situation. And he's going to be out there for 3/4 of the snaps. And that means, we're going to see a little bit more Dawson Knox in those situations, a little bit more Lee Smith, backup tight end situation there for those guys. But overall, $5,000 for Gabriel Davis, $7,600 for Cole Beasley. So you figure out if those price points make sense to you within the context of this slate. To do that, we need to learn about the entire slate. So let's talk about the Pittsburgh pass-catching options, where Eric Ebron had a big game last week. Came on for a lot of volume there in this Pittsburgh offense. 21% of the team's targets, trailed only Deontay Johnson in that game. So, really strong usage there for Ebron. Back-to-back weeks, north of 20% target share in the offense. And, Ben Roethlisberger getting very comfortable with Eric Ebron, who was out there for 80% of the snaps last week. We've seen snaps be there for Ebron. He's averaging 79% on the year. That's really strong usage for a tight end. Tight ends tend to rotate in and out a little bit more than that. But Ebron out there 80% of the time in this offense. Vance McDonald also rotating in about 39%. It's been over a month since Vance McDonald's drawn a target. So overall, not entirely worried about Vance McDonald. $200 option. You can do better than that, I think, in this particular game. $6,400 for Ebron, by the way. Looking at the 3-wide set, Deontay Johnson will be your most expensive guy at $9K. He got you 23% of the targets last week, 26 the week before that, 35 the week before that. Targets have really been there for Deontay Johnson, and he's been out there on the field a lot. The team has really utilized Juju and Deontay Johnson quite a bit. Chase Claypool, a guy whose role has gone down a little bit over the last few weeks. Only ran 43% of the team's routes last week. That's a really disappointing number, especially for a player as talented as Chase Claypool. He's just got to be out there more, drawing more consistent targets. Anytime you're banking on a guy who's a big play threat, not on the field a ton, opens up a really wide range of outcomes. Big play threats are big wide range outcomes regardless. But if you tell me the floor is getting closer and closer to 0, That's tough to play Chase Claypool with any degree of confidence. Of course, this is not a floor-based game. This is a ceiling-based game, and we are chasing ceiling-type players. So Chase Claypool could certainly get there at $8,400. There's more paths to him not getting there. I think that's a very important distinction. Now, one guy whose role is ascending over the last couple weeks, while Claypool has gone the other way, is James Washington. $2,600 for James Washington. He got 55% of the team's routes run last week. So basically, he and Claypool put together equaled one full-time player. So James Washington starting to see still a little bit of Claypool's work, and was efficient last week. Played pretty well overall, but still only saw 8% of the team's targets. That's the same number that Chase Claypool saw, but he'll get it for you at about a quarter of the salary, or a third of the salary. $2,600 versus $8,400 there for Chase Claypool. Ray McLeod mixing in a little bit there as well. Just not enough usage for us to get super excited about, but at $800, Ray is much more the punt play that we're looking for. He's involved on special teams. He can get you a return touchdown. But overall, projecting it offensively, he is the type of guy who could, take an end around to the house or some sort of big play. You're hoping to catch lightning in a bottle on a one-play type situation for Ray McLeod. And, even if he only got you, 4 or 5 points or something like that, that may still be enough at $800. So just keep that in mind there for Pittsburgh. Now, looking at the running game on these two teams, we should be seeing James Conner. He's activated off the COVID-19 list. Should be good to go, ready to play in this game. Benny Snell, what a disappointment in the games that Conner has missed. Conner cost you $8,000. It was $1,400 for Snell as well. Obviously, we're not considering Snell as long as Conner's in the game, unless you're doing it just to be contrarian at this point. I don't see Snell being super heavily involved unless you think he's going to steal a goal line touchdown. And he could. As a vulture option there for Benny Snell, he could be the guy that relieves James Conner near the goal line for $1,400. Perhaps that's worth the upside there. Jalen Samuels is back, and he's involved in this offense. Anthony McFarland's involved in the offense. It's just kind of a nightmare there behind James Conner in a lot of ways that sort of just chip away at the ceiling for James Conner. It's like James Conner could be a really good player if he got all the goal line work and all of the targets, but he's not getting either of those in abundance. So overall, looking at whether to play him at $8,000 or not, I think there's a lot of reasons to fade James Conner, but you want to do so selectively. I mean, anytime we're talking about one game sample sizes, guys, like if I say we're talking about fading James Conner, please understand that it seems like the field may be more onto James Conner than we think we should be. But in a one game sample size, James Conner could just have 50 points. You just never know. So just take that all with a grain of salt and embrace the variance when building lineups overall, making sure your lineup fits together and congeals nicely and contains a lot of uniqueness built within it. I think is the most important things for us to take away. On the Buffalo side, Devin Singletary, $5,800, Zach Moss, $4,800. Those are the two guys that we're considering there. Now, it seemed like Zach Moss was starting to run away with his backfield, but a not-so-fast my friend from my guy Devin Singletary, who got 67% of the team's snaps last week. That was going very much the other direction there, as Zach Moss had sort of started to steal that offense. And so 85% of the snaps for Devin Singletary, 67% of the rush attempts for Devin Singletary last week. He's being more involved in the passing game. That's sort of been a standard throughout this whole thing, is that Singletary's more involved than Moss in the pass game. However, if we're telling me that Singletary is the better rusher and the team prefers him out there as the rusher, now all of a sudden I'm really interested in Singletary at $5,800. Could be a good way to sort of change of pace here between, the passing attack led by Josh Allen, rushing attack led by Devin Singletary. So overall, much more interested in Singletary than Moss. I do think the guard has changed once again, and now we should expect more Singletary than Moss based on what we know now here in this game. Let's take a look at the captain, guys, and see who pops up here this week. It's my guy, Stephon Diggs, the $10,000 man. I love Stephon Diggs here in this matchup. He's going to project out really well. He's going to get a ton of targets, carries a lot of upside, but still, just keep in mind here that even this projection here has him right around 23% optimal at the captain rate. So, while I love him there, I understand 3/4 of the time he's not getting there. But overall, I think he carries a unique combination of ceiling And then I think Cole Beasley after him is another guy who, like, you just say, well, what if the targets go slightly away from Diggs? Which player are they more likely to fall to next? And it's Beasley for sure. So Beasley gives you a good price point combination as well. He opens up a lot more options for you in the rest of your lineups. Beasley, a guy who's hanging in there right around 15% at the time. Following that is Juju. I was surprised Juju rated out so much better than Deontay. Well, I guess it's not so much better, but marginally better than Deontay Johnson in this game. And I suppose it's got to do with the price. Like, while we know Deontay Johnson is, currently the sort of target favorite there in Pittsburgh, Juju is the guy who's $2,000 cheaper. $9K for Deontay Johnson, $7K for Juju Smith-Schuster. Overall, I think we could say that, Juju may possess, a little bit more of a unique skill set than Deontay Johnson. I don't know if that's entirely fair. I think I would go that far. I'm a big Juju fan. But overall, I think we've seen enough there to say Juju could maybe, pick up bigger chunks, even though Deontay's a more consistent piece of the offense. Starting to struggle a little bit with drops. I wouldn't be surprised if the target started shifting away from Deontay Johnson. So after Juju is Josh Allen, then Deontay Johnson, and then we get into the first running back there with James Conner, Ben Roethlisberger, Chase Claypool, then big drop-off after that. Let's take a look at the flex, where it's two quarterbacks up top per usual, Josh Allen, Ben Roethlisberger, right there together. But understand, still opportunities to fade quarterbacks in the right situations. Make sure that, if you're building a portfolio of lineups, you don't want, double quarterback in all of them. Try to mix some guys in. Following those two guys, it's Juju, Stephon Diggs. I guess they're sort of grading out as my favorite receivers on each of these teams. Followed by James Conner, Cole Beasley, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and then our first kicker, Chris Boswell. Chris Boswell was on the injury report earlier this week. Looks like he is good to go. Does not carry a game designation here this week. Then after Boswell, Singletary, Ebron, Gabriel Davis, and then, pretty decent sized drop off after that. I think that covers most of the usual suspects here. And this looks like it should be a really interesting game. A lot of different combinations. I think the Josh Allen captain thing, as long as you do anything other than that, salary's not going to be a huge issue. Go Josh Allen captain, could be tough to make all the pieces work. I wish the Sims were a little bit higher on Devin Singletary, but I think you could also, while Devin Singletary may project for more work in the offense, Pittsburgh run defense could be pretty tough for a mediocre player like Devin Singletary to get past. So the volume may not be good enough there for Singletary to carry him in a pretty tough matchup. Overall, who does the matchup favor? Matchup favors the Steelers. So if you're trying to build lopsided lineups, I think building lineups with more Steelers than Bills, probably your optimal way to go about building. Overall, that's going to do it for us this week. Sunday night show. Be sure you check in on the Monday night show over on the Mayo Media Network YouTube channel. Go check us out every Monday over there, or subscribe. Favorite podcasting platform. Go check it out right there. And you can check out the Captain Spot podcast feed right up in your ear 3 times a week. Really appreciate any thumbs up and subscriptions you guys can give. Thanks for tuning in here for Sunday night. Check you guys tomorrow for the Monday night show. Later.